Our climate has changed, and it's going to keep on changing. We have a good idea of what to expect globally, but not all places are affected in the same way. This is especially true for climate change hotspots, areas that experience climate change more intensely than other places. For the hundreds of millions of people living in the semi-arid hotspot regions of Africa and Asia, life is already challenging. Their climates are harsh and hard to predict. Things are likely to get worse, making the problems we face much harder to overcome. But it's these same areas that could teach us how to adapt.
For thousands of years, local people have maintained a balance with nature that's allowed them to survive in difficult conditions. That's why a group of leading research and development organizations have formed ASSAR. We've been studying how the climate has already changed and is expected to change in these hotspots. We want to better understand the impacts of climate change and pinpoint effective ways to adapt so that people living in these areas are better prepared for a changing world. This video has been made to share with you the most recent research that we have, so that together we can plan for the future.
The semi-arid regions of East Africa are among the most food-insecure regions in the world, and many people rely on the rains for crop production and livestock. Communal conflict and the resulting population displacement has already challenged regional security and peace, but climate change is bringing a new dimension to East Africa's vulnerability, partly because of the low economic and institutional capacity to deal with its impacts. The semi-arid regions have been warming by an average of 0.16 degrees Celsius a decade for the last 50 years. This trend is set to continue. The number of very hot days are set to almost double, and the average temperature could increase by up to 4 degrees Celsius in some regions by 2050. Projections for rainfall are much more uncertain, and much more research needs to be done. What we do know is that there are likely to be large increases in wet extremes in the future. Drought and flood hazards, widespread poverty, human diseases, and high population growth rates are expected to intensify the demand for food, water, and livestock forage in East Africa, and different groups and societies will experience these risks in different ways. Women, disabled people, the elderly and children, as well as the rural and urban poor, are especially vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, and these groups often have limited access to the resources needed for adaptation.
In the course of the ASSAR project, we're going to deepen understanding of what impacts these changes will cause and what challenges this will bring for different groups, like pastoralists, women, youth and the elderly, and those living in urban and rural areas. But ASSAR's aim is to go further than that. We want to understand how to face these challenges, what factors make a real difference in being able to effectively adapt to these impacts, and how to improve people's well-being. Ultimately, we want to see a shift from adaptation that happens in a piece-by-piece, short-term way to adaptation that brings widespread, long-term changes that will help better protect people and environments.
We'll be working with decision makers, practitioners and communities so that ASSAR research brings direct benefit in shaping and informing how the most vulnerable can adapt to the challenges ahead. Our climate is changing. It's time that we do too.